Okay, I think I'll get started now. If people join, they'll be able to pick up from where we've left off. So thank you. Welcome to a very sunny Thursday. Hope it is for all of you guys as well. For BCN's webinar today on rethinking stock management and streamlining fulfillment. So just to introduce the team that's going to be leading the webinar today. So my name is Emma. I'm Emma Portlock. I'm head of new business here at BCN, and I also head up our relationship with Microsoft. So lovely to meet you all today, and hope you find the webinar insightful and useful. I'll hand over to Andy to introduce himself.
Thank you. So I have the pleasure of looking after our productivity solutions team here at BCN, and we use Microsoft toolings, predominantly the Power Platform, to make tools and solutions to make businesses' lives a bit easier and return a bit of time to the team. So that's us today.
Thank you, Andy. And over to you, Fareeya.
Hi, I am Fareeya Mahomed, a senior ERP consultant specializing in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. I have spent many years implementing ERP for a wide range of businesses with a strong focus in finance and stock management.
Thank you, Fareeya. And last but by no means least, over to you, Mark.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Mitchelson. I'm a principal with Freeman Clarke, supporting businesses in a portfolio basis across the country. My background has been one of supporting ERP deployment through enterprise. Started my career with Unilever. I was 12 years as CIO for Sodexo and have done a number of large-scale interim roles with companies from Sheffield Boardmaster and Liberty Steel to a slew of SMBs that are working exclusively in manufacturing, distribution or construction.
Amazing, thank you. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk through some of the challenges that we've seen from our experience of working in the wholesale industry. We're going to talk about the journey so far, sort of what we've seen from a tech perspective. Where they're going to list some real applications of what we've seen with our customers, how we've helped prospects or customers in these areas. And we're going to kind of go through let's rethink the roadmap. You know, how do you start this journey? You know, what can you do next? If there's things that resonate, you know, how can we move you forwards on that? It says Q&A at the end. You should all have access to the chat button within this. We're very happy to take questions if you have them as we go along. So please don't feel that you've got to wait to the end. We're very happy for this to be, you know, more interactive, and if there's things you want to comment on, then very happy to do that. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to take us through some of the key challenges that we see and have seen in the industry. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think just bringing this slide to life a little. All the examples I will reference over the next 10 minutes will be very much about experiences and questions that clients and customers have posed of us this year. So this is not historical. This is right up to date. It's current, and a number of these engagements we are working on as we speak. So we look here at the themes of where is my stock stored? Where is it? What warehouse is it in? Whereabouts in the warehouse is it? We can get into all sorts of conversations about replenishment stock, pick phase stock, etc., etc. But traditionally, this has been managed by tooling and teams, and we've seen this year companies that have done very shiny new ERP deployments. A specific clients I work with at the moment manufactures, stocks, distributes high-end office furniture. They've migrated from a whole slew of individual systems across to BC with CRM and done a joint deployment, but they do not have an understanding of what's happening on their shop floor. And they're doing that because they haven't gone through our process to understand what operationally happens in the warehouse, how they're managing the stock on a day-to-day basis. The MRP has not been configured correctly. It was very much driven by the client's demand rather than an innate understanding of how MRP can add value. More so, the disconnect between CRM and BC is showing that as a business, they're unable to understand what customers are wanting, what frequency of delivery looks like. And what we're trying to get to now is layer that level of analytics and reporting over the solution to catch back up, to allow the business to understand the profile of what they're selling, the profile of their customer requirements, and therefore what they need to stock or not, as the case may be, certainly so they can meet some very tight delivery timetables. Have I got the right stock based on demand? Again, a client we are working with at the moment has a challenge in understanding what demand looks like, similar to the previous example, but also trying to understand what future demand is. So this business manufactures in Turkey and in China, imports stock and then self-distributes on a B2B and a B2C basis. And the product is PPE, very focused around shoes and boots, but a wide range of PPE in addition, but the main core is footwear. Their delivery times 8 to 10 weeks over water. So they really need to have a good understanding of what the sales profile does, the seasonality of that business, and how they can plan what their purchase needs to be and what their shipping needs to be to have the stock in the UK, in their 3PL warehouse, on time, ready to service their customers. Not as simple as it seems, because the product they buy is not just 10,000 pairs of boots X, Y, or Z. That needs to be profiled against sizing from a size 3, say, to a 15. But you need to be able to profile that and then plan that across the demand. And understanding that requires an ability to model and understand what the customer requirements are, what the stock, and what the seasonality looks like. How long have these items been in my warehouse? I'm working with a tyre distributor in the UK, delivers a third of all tyres every day to tyre shops across the country. Just managing 15 warehouses and what stock is in what location, which tyre is in what location, whether that tyre is within date, whether the lots match, whether the servicing the client against the SLA. So the post office SLA is no tyre has a manufacture date over 5 years old, for example, has been a perennial problem for this business. And trying to use, we're at the point of trying to use some analytics now to understand what that profile is and get into a new way of working around stock rotation, which should have been in place some time ago. I think we would all agree. But it is a driving point in that business at the moment, how they manage stock in general, because they've got more stock than they need, and a lot of that stock hasn't moved in a long time. Valuation of stock. I was called to a client to do a due diligence exercise as part of the PE investments, which had failed. And that failed because the due diligence auditors stopped on day one, because they very clearly couldn't get an accurate stock valuation out of that business, and that prevented quite a large investment and a very interesting future project. We've swung into action there, replacing those two, and we found an awful lot of stock that had been completely missed. And it just goes to show, I think, the understanding of what the client demand should be and having stock levels that are appropriate. The tooling that was in place, both the ERP and the analytics that they had just wasn't up to doing that job. And obviously there's some serious accounting issues around that, but we've managed to correct that, got into a good place, and that investment has flowed through. But it underlines the point about understanding what stock valuation adds, where it needs to fit in, and how it can be addressed if you don't necessarily have the tooling today. Last point, can I see my stock value in real time? I mentioned a minute ago my client that manages PPE stock. They have a 3PL warehouse. They have a web presence and an e-store for both B2B and separately for B2C customers at the moment. And the business model was really driven circa 2010 on a technology stack based around Nav on-prem and some limited functionality around integration. They do not have the agility at this point because the interfaces between all the components are set to run overnight in a very old-fashioned way. They don't have, as we said before, the innate understanding of what that customer demand looks like and the ability to profile that demand. And we're currently working through how we can revolutionise that business and generate probably a 30% growth just on resolving the interfaces, because they'll be able to meet the demand that the customers are placing on them today. A lot of that is based upon valuing what data and having that data in real time, and starts to unlock potential that you can't achieve at the moment. My last point, I'm sure we'll come on to it, the dreaded AI word. Obviously, there's a lot, we're in that hype cycle at the moment, and there's a lot of discussion. We're getting quite a lot of calls around how do I use AI in my business around how I'm managing stock and how I'm planning my activities. And the answer is not always the easiest one, because often the issue lies in data not having been curated and managed and organised in such a way that those can be addressed. And we can deal with the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that has been around for ages in terms of OCRing documents and giving simple document searches, etc. The real value comes in how we're curating this data now going forward and keeping it in locations that we can access, a mix of on-prem, on laptop, on desktop, on file servers, in cloud storage, but starting to corral this now, using the tech stack that's available, using some of the tools that have already been mentioned today, and starting to make that data accessible so we can actually layer on some of the advantages of AI to understand why tender X, Y, or Z wasn't successful, or why these 10 tenders were successful, what were the points that brought through the win, into how we manage our stock more effectively, understanding customer need, looking at whether there is a seasonality or an event-driven reason for buying profiles, and get a far better understanding of value. So those are the things that we're seeing. Hopefully that resonates with some people on the call. I'm more than happy to take any conversations or any questions around that at any point. But otherwise, Emma, if I hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was great, and good insight there into some of the challenges you're seeing with customers right now. And obviously you've mentioned technology, and that kind of leads us on into these are the challenges you're seeing from an industry perspective. What have we seen from a technical perspective in the background that's kind of supporting these challenges? So obviously, if we go back to the 80s, we saw huge increase in things like hardware. Then it moved into software in the 90s and 2000s. Then it went into sort of data, and now you've mentioned the dreaded buzzword of AI. But AI has been around a while. Back in the day when I worked at IBM, far too many years ago to mention, we did AI way back then, right? But it took us a year, 2 years to deliver. You know, these days it's obviously can be a couple of weeks. So we've seen all sorts of things from kind of printers all the way through to obviously email, spreadsheets, etc. Really we've then seen the real growth in that kind of data and AI, and having those specialist skills in it to actually make the most of it. You know, you don't know what you don't know. What is there out there for me to be able to do? And obviously everyone on this call and everyone we speak to is in a completely different place for this journey. You know, some might still be, you know, running businesses on spreadsheets. Some may already have a fully functioning ERP cloud type system, so that they're more appropriate for the AI journey. So Andy, is there anything that you'd like to add to that? Any kind of thoughts or insight?
No, I mean, I think that summarises it really nicely. I always feel old when I have to remind my kids that the internet used to come through the letterbox on a CD that I had to install on the computer. So we've kind of all lived through this to some extent. And although this is the journey that we've seen with kind of industry across the board and across the world, we're still seeing that this is a relevant journey that organisations are taking. You know, we're just starting a project at the moment with a company that are using carbonated copy forms. So when they go and do a piece of work with a client, they're filling in the paperwork, leaving like the white sheet with the client. They're bringing the blue sheet back for admin, and they're holding on to the pink sheet for their kind of their kind of personal audit trail. So there's a journey we're all on. We're all in different parts of this. There'll be some, you know, early adopters that are probably a bit further on and are kind of pushing for the new and the latest and greatest. There are some that are kind of, you know, for a number of different very valid reasons, might be a bit more towards the 80s side of things, but we can pick up wherever. You know, this is a well-trodden path. So, you know, looking at where we're at is the first step, and then understanding where we want to get to so we can build a roadmap. It might be that, you know, we're moving someone from carbon copies to a more digital form, and maybe that's all they need. Maybe that's it, and maybe that's more than sufficient and covers, you know, brings enough efficiency in the business. Maybe that's the first step in many to get them towards, you know, a completely different digital transformation. So yeah, it's just understanding that roadmap. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It's just looking at where you are and where we kind of want to get to.
Amazing. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. So obviously we've kind of looked at the kind of main pains, challenges that we see, the sort of tech that's behind it, and then that's brought us from the experience that we've had is to really bring this into 3 key operations that we see in the industry, and those being order processing, stock and inventory levels, and warehouse operations. So what we're going to do for about the next sort of 10-15 minutes or so is delve deeper into each of these and the types of things we're seeing, how we're helping customers, and what those next steps could look like. For those of you that joined slightly after I'd done introductions, if you do have any questions at any point, just please do pop them in the chat. This is live. We will respond if you do have any questions. We'll do our best to respond, shall I say. Okay, so delving into order processing. Fareeya, if I could just hand over to you to just maybe give some insight of the types of things you're seeing and where that kind of leads to cost of inefficiency.
Yeah, of course. So what I often find is that, you know, manual order processing is one of the areas which are most problematic and can even be seen as a blocker during ordering. You know, it introduces friction purely because it's a lengthy and painful process. You have the risk of, you have a level of risk and inefficiencies specifically in an area which should be smooth and scalable. These inefficiencies have hidden costs, and in the long run, if not sooner, they can cause slower fulfillment, higher error rates, duplicate effort, and ultimately poor customer service or experience. Combining all of these inefficiencies, as order volumes grow, bottlenecks are then created, causing more harm than good, thus preventing scalability. So the question here is, why are we still doing it this way? Why does it need to be so labor intensive? And the answer is, purely because that's just the way it's always been done.
Excellent, thank you. So I guess if people are feeling that, might be people nodding in the background and hearing some of those things, what do we then look at when we're kind of rethinking that process? How could people look at this in a different way? And I guess, Andy, if I come to you at the first instance, so assuming someone's on that kind of low digital maturity, that chart that we saw, they're at the start of this journey. You mentioned like the carbon copies. What kinds of things could people do to rethink the process?
It's really interesting. Every kind of engagement we start, it is the process that's the key thing, because we can make apps and automations and use AI and chatbots to make processes more efficient and easier. But a lot of the time, if we make the process itself more efficient, then there's less change that's required and kind of less investment in technology. So the first thing that's really important is just being open to that change. A lot of people and organizations, institutions we deal with, the process is the process because it's always been the process. So being open to, there's going to be a bit of a change. It might be a little bit uncomfortable, but as we're in it together, and it's for the best. Is really important. Getting those people on board and going through that kind of change management process. It's also interesting who we talk to, because a lot of kind of middle upper management have an idea of what the process is, which is right. But actually, when we talk to the people doing the work, the amount of work and effort that goes into that process is not known or fully understood. We've done a lot of work with a kitchen manufacturer, and when the process was the order comes in, we just have to go through, look at what the stock levels are, order anything that we had gaps for, and then it goes through, which is nice and straightforward. It's great. But what we didn't realise till we started talking to the people doing that work is that there were 12 or 15 different spreadsheets they had to go to that different teams and different departments had put together, and everyone had their own slightly different way of doing things to pull that information in. And these people are killing themselves over it. So, we've all got those kind of hidden heroes in our organisation that are just coming in and slogging. Because this is the process, this is my job, I'm just going to get on with it. And something that's really key when we're rethinking the process is going and talking to them, and being able to ask them, what are the pain points that you've got when you're doing this? Because sometimes just changing where data comes from relieves the pressure and the admin burden on them, so they can spend more time then on kind of those value adds tasks. So there's a lot that comes with it, which is why it can sometimes be a bit uncomfortable. So it kind of comes down to that openness to change and accepting it could be a bit uncomfortable, and finding those hidden heroes that are doing the slog to kind of keep things going and looking at how we can address their issues.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. Really appreciate that. And then, Fareeya, if I turn to you, for someone that's more in that kind of in the middle, in that medium digital maturity, what's the types of things you're seeing there?
Moving to the medium digital maturity, as you say, is the next step, is kind of moving along the lines of an ERP system, or, if you're not there yet, even a basic order management system. Andy mentioned, this 12 to 15 step process that users have been how they've been working, but these steps can be cut down to maybe a 5-step process. I've had a client where ordering was done in Excel, with a certain layout created and company logos, and then you've got the title of the document at the top. But each sheet in this document, one was for requesting a quotation from the supplier, then manually converting that to a PDF, emailing it to the supplier, then a requisition order was created and sent for approval to management. This was also a manual process in Excel, copying that sheet, changing the document title, etc. Then The next sheet was the actual order, copying the information again and again. And it's a long and repetitive process. But by introducing an ERP, we streamlined the processes where we were able to use purchase quotes within the system, click of a button, send that over to management for approval. Again, another button when the quote can be converted to an order. What took my client about half an hour to an hour to do was now done within a matter of minutes. So, we could even take it a step further and integrate the ERP with e-commerce platforms or automation rules to make it even quicker and easier. But it all depends on your journey and your budget, of course. And we can even phase this out to make it easier and cost efficient for you as well.
Amazing, thank you. That's really, really great insight. And then Andy, just coming back to you. So say if someone's gone through the part that Fareeya's just mentioned and they're now in that kind of high maturity layer, what kinds of things are we seeing there? And I think, Mark alluded to this a little bit in when he spoke around that kind of forecast demand generation, those types of things. So what are you seeing from your perspective with customers?
Exactly those kind of things. So it's great, and like business processes are fundamentally about data. We have data coming in, we have to process it, do something with it, and then there's an output of some kind. So it's looking at the power of data, and I know with another webinar coming up in the future that we're going to focus more on data, but being able to have that, to be able to see clearly and quickly, what do we have, what do we need, where's it going to, where's it coming from, using that for forecasting. Again, there's a whole history of industry looking at forecasting, but now we have more tools with AI and natural language to be able to do those kind of things kind of quicker and more efficiently. But then we also have those technologies. So if we look at the client I've got with the carbon copies, we're going to digitize that form. And again, that might be it. But it might be that actually once we've got that in place, instead of having to type that form up, they can narrate or dictate what they've done at this job site. And then we use speech to text to extract that, and then we can use AI to summarize that, or we can take a picture and we can get AI to look at the picture and describe what's going on. So we can then just use that once we've got kind of the foundation. This is our process. We're happy that it is a good process. We've made it as efficient as we can with the kind of out of the box tools. It's then looking at what we can do for a further value add to have that increased return on investment and greater efficiencies with all these new and exciting tools that are coming out.
Amazing, thank you. So we've kind of gone through some of the things we're seeing and ways we're supporting and working with customers. So what's the next steps? What do you do if any of these are resonating true? I mean, what's coming through to me, guys, everything you're talking about is people, processes, that the tech is secondary, which might sound strange, coming from a tech firm, but I think that's the key bit around this is like audit your current systems, your workflows, what people are doing, and as you say, Andy, the people that are actually doing the jobs, let's find out how these things are actually created. Automate wherever we can, like maybe do a pilot, pick something that might be a quicker win, like you can do it, it's high value to the company, but it's quite quick and easy to do, like transforming an Excel into automated, or being able to visualize the Excel in something, someone like me who Excel is my nemesis, I much prefer to see pictures, and then actually training teams on that, what's happening, what's changing, and then making sure that's kind of monitored and optimized, because with all these things it's never done, you're just on a journey where you're constantly refining and tweaking. So thanks for that. So if we then move on to the second area that we spoke about, we're talking around like stock and inventory levels. So Fareeya, if I just come to you on, what you've seen, maybe an example and some of the kind of cost of efficiencies you're seeing in this area.
Yeah, this is often enough one of the biggest issues or one of the most disruptive pinpoints that I found in warehousing, and that's clients have inaccurate stock levels. And to be fair, this causes a ripple effect across departments, having too much of stock or having not enough stock. These stock outs lead to missed sales. overstocking leading to increased holding costs. You could have additional expenses where, depending on the type of stock being held, you could have expired stock in your warehouse and then having to reject orders due to this and then having to reorder and making sure it's in on time. At the end of the day, frustrated customers. It is quite important to make sure that your sales team and your purchasing teams know what you have in your warehouse, and that we've kind of mentioned this earlier, but having the visibility of that stock in real time.
Excellent, thank you. And so in this scenario, what would be, your recommendation of rethinking the process in this area?
Rethinking the process in this area, there's different levels, right? You've got as the lowest level, where we could transform, depending on your technology journey. You have the ability to think a bit smarter with regards to whether it's your worksheets that are being used or, the spreadsheets, building formulas, conditional formatting. I think, Andy, and your team, you have a bit more experience on making those sorts of things a bit smarter. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, very much so. And it's things like we did a piece of work with a pharmaceutical company, and stock and bits really important. We're kickstarting a piece off with a food retailer as well. These things have shelf lives. So, like you said yourself, Fareeya, that once that stock's there, we need to know what it is. We need to know how long we've got to kind of shift it and put it through that supply chain. We don't want to kind of lose any of the money on this. So the food company we were working with, they essentially just had clipboards and they were going around still manually doing things, but they have visions of scaling and growing over the next 5 years and acquiring other organizations and bits. They know that's not scalable. The pharmaceutical company we were working with, kind of similar, they want to branch out into other areas. So looking to kind of digitize that process. So we've got some structured data, and instead of having the checklist that they go around and they count to go back to someone else who then types it into a spreadsheet that saves it somewhere that someone else can report on, we've just got a really simple app that they can go around. You can scan a barcode, fill in the details, and then all the information's there, and we're kind of good to go. And kind of building on a point you made a second ago, Emma, around those kind of proof of concepts and getting something in to show what's going on. We're doing that as kind of a proof of value, I think we'd call it, to say, look, we can do something that's quite quick and quite straightforward, prove the value of it, and then we can have a look at how far we want to take it. Again, kind of going on to that journey. One of the decisions we have to make is, we can do this, but should we do it? So doing something that's quite quick, that we can turn around quite quickly to show the value, to then look to make sure that there is going to be this big enough return on investment and allow that scale and growth across the organization. So we've got that in mind when we're rethinking the process, what our end goal is, but we're starting with something quite small, quite quick to turn around, and kind of that proof of concept test case.
Amazing, thank you. And for if people have then got to like that medium digital maturity, what sorts of things are you then seeing at that stage that people are rethinking and doing?
Yeah, you've got the basics all ironed out now, right? So the next step is moving more towards an ERP, but that's really speaking helping you to manage your stock better and in real time, because at the moment they are manually capturing their stock, or the orders for that matter on spreadsheets. It's also because someone is manually counting that stock, and it could be lost in translation between departments and between people in the team, so the warehousing team, the admin team, or it could even be because of their current system being outdated. Now, I've got a client current project that I think Andy is also working on. We're both working on this, and they have been using a 20-year-old, if not older, system, which is completely bespoke to manage their stock. Yes, 20 years. It's really outdated. They're experiencing challenges on a daily basis. The system being too slow. stock is not correct. So what we've done was we phased out the approach, where phase one was dealing purely with finance, and now in this phase two of the project, we are introducing sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory, and that will be going live soon. Now, all of these processes can be managed within the ERP. Stock is captured then correctly. They have visibility of the items, of what is waiting to be, goods waiting to come in, items that are on sales orders waiting for customers to be shipped to customers. So they have that visibility, and it's not just one department that has that visibility. It's everyone that's using the system, everyone that's involved in that process has visibility and in real time. And then if you take it a bit further, you've got coming down to stock takes. You're able to count your stock easily, either by introducing a barcode scanning devices for that matter. Now, for this client, this is not part of this phase, but it is in the plan for the future. So forecasting is also something that will ease, or it will become better, as well as all of those hidden costs that we described earlier, like your stockouts and your overstocking. Those are now at a point where it's almost non-existent because it's a smoother process and transition.
Okay, amazing, thank you. And so I guess next steps again on this area, again audit your current inventory. What does it look like? How accurate is it? Again, tools is the secondary part of that. So then have a tool that helps you do that. Again, pilot a solution, as Fareeya mentioned. There's usually a phase one, phase two. You can't do everything in one big bang. And then again, you monitor and refine this as you go along. So then moving to our sort of third and final area that we really focus on is that warehouse operations part. So Andy, if I could just hand to you and just get your perspective on this particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a kind of an all-encompassing area for not just the warehouse itself, but the staff there, the machinery, there's a whole infrastructure that goes into this and everything else around it. So we've done a load of work with companies around like even shift management. It might be we've got a dedicated team. When the lorry turns up in the morning, it's all hands to get everything loaded and unloaded and sorted out. So losing a person to that is quite costly. And if I need to ring in sick because there's a bug going around, then fine. But then the team lead has to find other people to come in. So there's all of these kind of different bits and pieces. Again, with the projects we were talking about a moment ago with the pharmaceuticals and the food, highly regulated. So each of the suppliers and the partners they're working with, they have to have certificates to show that the food meets certain safety standards, that it's kind of halal food, and all of the legislation that comes with pharmaceuticals. Again, it's not necessarily around the stock itself, but it's part of the operational necessity of the organisation to track and manage those certificates and those processes. Again, incredibly manual, but we've put apps and automations on top of that to try and relieve that administrative burden. So it's just looking at those wider operational impacts on the people, the machinery, the organisation, and kind of that ripple effect. And everything else that kind of gets bulked in with it.
Yeah, that's great. And those kind of the costs of the inefficiency are all around the picking, the packing, the shipping, as you've mentioned, that the labor costs. And I know for my husband works completely different industry, but in the fencing industry, in construction, and if his supplier doesn't get the right amount of goods to him when they said they were going to, that supplier, funnily enough, drops to the bottom of the list for his next big project or order, right? So
absolutely,
it's that kind of hidden cost as well, that are you going to lose business on the back of it because people won't use you as your supplier next time?
100%. The company's reputation is massive. So we've done bits of work where we've had sensors to measure the vibration of bearings in machines, so we can forecast when the machines are likely to break, so that we can preemptively book in servicing and get machine parts in to to keep operations going. Because if you've got, if we're talking like forklifts, if you've got 3 forklifts and one of them breaks, that's a third of stock that you can't move, which is huge. So there's loads of those kind of picking and delivery and all these other things that kind of cascade off of these that can seem quite small and innocuous problems and issues.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And so I guess staying with you, Andy, when you're actually then rethinking the process, so if you're at that low digital maturity stage, what kinds of things, how can people get started? Because obviously this is a massive, challenge in itself. So what kinds of things could they get started with?
So it is where we find kind of the quick wins is just looking at those bottlenecks. So it might be that it would be amazing if we can put sensors in all of our machines to keep them running 24/7. That might not be the first thing we need to look at. It might be, like I said, looking at staffing. So that we've got a process for if someone's sick, they can send a message in that automatically sends out messages to others who are kind of on standby for overtime or have volunteered to do overtime, so that we can speed up getting other people in to continue that picking and everything else. So again, the people who have to deal with those headaches, the people in the warehouse, the kind of warehouse managers who are picking these things up and are the ones who are having to firefight, is speaking to them to see where are these bottlenecks. Where could we make potentially quite a small change to get quite a big difference? And then it's looking at the efficiencies that technology brings. So again, we're looking at digitizing paper processes. And like I say, with the certificates, we now have, for a couple of companies, we've got a database of these are the certificates from these suppliers, this is the end date. Great, having that is fantastic and better than what we used to have. But now we can very quickly build an automation that then sends an email to the supplier to say, your certificate for X, Y, and Z is going to expire next week. Please send us the new one. We can then report on that. There's, those things are really quick and easy to kind of implement. We can have a huge positive transformation for a business.
Excellent, thank you. And then Fareeya, if people are a bit further along in that journey, so they're at that kind of medium digital maturity, what sorts of things are you seeing then?
The easier one is all done. It's the quick wins done by Andy's team, but on our side, we want to go down to the basics, right? We want to try and understand and sit with, I think we mentioned this earlier, but try to understand how the client works, try to understand how their day-to-day processes work as well. And for that matter, how their warehouse is set up, because the way that the warehouse is set up, that can also be replicated in the system. So, for example, does your warehouse have a goods in area? Does it have a goods out area? Does it have a QA area? So is it split into all of these different zones? And then, having to put stock, goods have come in and now you need to put it away onto the shelves. You need to use certain equipment. All of these actions that you take that's being done physically in the warehouse can also be done on the system, so that you're not having to replicate and lose lose your stock visibility and lose that the way that you're working in your warehouse can actually be done in the system at the same time as well. So it's efficiency at the same time.
So I guess it's like automation, right? So it's
yeah.
The systems are able to automate these tasks so things get done quicker and more productive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So those setups, for example, and I think Mark mentioned this at the beginning of this webinar as well. It's making sure that your system, you know how the system works, and 2, you understand what the client requires, because sometimes what the client needs and what they want is completely different. So we need to understand how they work, how they need to be able to work, and translate that into the system at the same time.
Excellent, thank you. Really appreciate that insight. And so again, next steps, let's assess what does that current warehouse workflow look like. What are the right tools to help that? It might be a Power Automate app that replaces a a manual task that currently happens. But let's look at what those tasks are first before we put tools or tech in place. Again, use a pilot automation task first, and monitor and optimize. So I think those are some of the key next steps. Thank you very much for the insight in those 3 areas, guys. Really appreciate that. So I think that's taken us through from order processing, stock and inventory levels, and the warehouse operations, some of the key things that we're seeing, what we're seeing our clients face, and how we're helping them. And all of these things are all underpinned by data. Data is absolutely at the heart of all of this, because even if you've got everything working brilliantly, automated, if the data coming in that's being fed in is erroneous or not useful, then everything coming out the other end will also be the same. And because it's so key, we're actually holding the next webinar is on the 9th of October, where we will be covering data and how to cut costs and forecast for the future. If you want to go into some more detail on data, please do join us for that. So I mentioned right at the top of the agenda that how do we rethink how we start on this, right? So we've given a lot of information, a lot of insight, but where do I, as a customer, actually get started? The way it used to be done, certainly looking back at my IBM days as well, is we implement something, we implement an ERP, or we implement some tools. Our approach and what we've seen in this area and the areas that we've talked through is actually a very different approach. So discover what it is you need. This is going to be around kind of people, processes. What do I need? How is it currently done? And then how can I refine that? How can I make that better? How can I make it quicker? How can I make it more productive? Build that roadmap. You've heard, a few times during this is a phased approach, a pilot type approach. This isn't an 18-month project where you're going to have, 20 consultants with you for that kind of 18 months. Actually look at piece by piece and stage by stage. What does that roadmap look like? And underneath all of this is your return. What's your return on investment like? What are the people involved? What's the technology involved? And what's the goals? Why are you doing this? What's the end goal to make this a success? And then once we've done all of that, and we have then done implementation of the things that we know are going to transform our business in the right roadmap for us, we can then optimize those things. As I mentioned, on one of the slides as we were going through, these types of engagements are never done. You can get them done as they are in that point in time, but then something might change. Taxes might be put on goods that we didn't have before from other countries. So there's things that you're going to have to refine within those processes and the solutions you've put forwards. So that's what we were going to take you through today. If there are any questions, please do drop them in the chat now. We've got another 10 minutes that we're very happy to answer any questions or observations that you may have. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes and see if there are any questions. And thank you again to everyone that's spoken today. I've really found that insightful. Okay, I'm not seeing questions. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex. Great to hear. If there aren't any questions, I'll give you all back 10 minutes. Really appreciate you joining. Thank you to all the speakers today, and hopefully see you on our next webinar on the 9th of October. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
And yes, I will send through a copy of the presentation.